So next, our next session is with Julia Seal. And Julia, I know you're here hanging out with us. You can come up on screen. I'm going to make you co-host as well, which I believe you needed. There you are. There we are.
Oh, how's everyone? Wasn't that beautiful?
Yeah, absolutely. Ah, good. Well, let me introduce you properly so that everyone knows who you are as well. So, Julia, besides being a dear friend and absolutely one of the people that has encouraged me so much throughout creating kind of this event, this project, she is the founder of Happiness Matters and Midlife. She's also a professional certified coach who draws on a multidisciplinary approach underpinned by integral relationship systems, leadership, and life coaching, as well as neuroscience and meditation. And she's just an all around cool person. So today, our format is a little bit more of an interview kind of style. And then I think with the time we have, you also do a bit of a applied practice with everyone, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, first of all, hi, everybody. And yes, we'd like to do as much interaction as possible. So either raise your hand or post a question. I'll keep looking in the chat box, and Jamie will also help me, because if we can coach in the session, that would also be great, although it's very short. Yeah, and I think it's such a beautiful place to come to this topic after listening to Katrina and then having Nicole talk to us and take us through some breath work. I don't know if any of you have had a chance. I thought it was quite funny that today in the Happiness Habits Challenge, our first challenge is breath. So that is so core to Wholebeing Happiness, and kind of just showing up for life with immense courage. So, I mean, I do feel a bit like I'm in another world right now after Nicole's session. So the one thing that was going on in my mind was like, bring yourself back, Julia. You're going to have to talk after this. And I can't float off into the clouds. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for that. So I want to build on what Katrina was saying, what Nicole's been saying about showing up with courage through adversity. Now, to kick us off, I kind of drew you a funny little picture, which I'm going to put up on the screen quickly, but then we're going to come back so that we're talking to each other. Well, it's not really a drawing. It's, let me try this. And you can have a look and see at my little picture here. So, yeah, I mean, this is not death by PowerPoint by any means, but what I wanted to do was give you a few visual cues of what we're talking about today. You know, the process, even that Lemon Rebellion is taking us on, where we're stuck and we're confused, all the way through resilience, into creativity, and into thriving. And then I want to have a look at Wholebeing Happiness in context of what Katrina was saying, and how do we get there? And then this whole thing, this black and white circle that we're looking at as well, which is going to talk a little bit to what Nicole was saying. So if you can remember little elements from this picture, that might help you too. There's no exam on what your memory is like. Since I have gone through menopause, I know what midlife foggy brain memory is all about. So did anybody see the sunflower or the smiley face? Probably not. So yeah, so Jamie, just in terms of kicking off, I think what I don't want to do is get into any kind of repetitive conversation and about what Katrina was talking about. But she was really talking about this shift where we've kind of had this wrong view of happiness, and more of this hedonistic view, this link of happiness, you know, to get successful, I'll get happy. So that's really what we're starting to question in the world right now. And in fact, I almost want to say, you can breathe like Nicole's taught us. you can get to whole being happiness. That's why, for me, it's one of the most fundamental tools. And listen, it's an essence. We've got to breathe to live, but we can actually use it for our whole being happiness. But something else that I really liked from Katrina's talk was, she kind of said that happiness is a bit like a unicorn. We all kind of know what it is, but we can't see it. And I love to think of happiness. And in my first discussion with Jamie, we spoke about, happiness being like the sun, right? And it's so bright and it's life-giving, this perfect white light that brings life to everything. But we almost can't see it, right? You can't see white light. And the only way we can unpack what it is in terms of our quest for happiness is when white light goes through a prism, or it goes through raindrops, or it goes through our tears, it breaks into the rainbow. And then you've got all these paths to happiness, right? All these, well, they are paths, and any route you take is going to get you somewhere, if we're even trying to get somewhere. And the idea is, so you could go down the relationships whole being route. And, to that point about relationships we were talking about earlier, is that relationships have been proven, our social connections, to be the biggest contributor to whole being happiness. So it just doesn't surprise me what's going on in the world right now and after COVID, and how we're all feeling quite disconnected from each other, and yet connected in places like this. That, it's time maybe to spend building connections again, and what are the connections that we want to build. But so where do you start? If you think of, you've got this rainbow, you've got all these colors, there's relationships, there's spiritual, there's breath, there's physical, the somatic world, there's the emotional space. Where do you start? And as a coach, I'm here to tell you that your place to start is at the hardest place, the adversity. All right, so this is the invitation into whole being, is whatever is most difficult for you, whatever you're stuck on, whatever you don't want to look at right now, that is actually the invitation to step towards that. Now, we do a great job of not stepping towards the most difficult things. We'll overdrink, we'll overeat, we'll watch Netflix, we'll procrastinate. We might even spend time in the other paths of whole being happiness before we get to this thing where we have the courage to step forward into it. So I thought today would be really useful to say, if your adversity is your gift and is your guide forward into whole being, what can we talk about today in terms of emotional whole being that can help with finding that place in you that's ready to evolve, that's ready to say, I'm ready for the next level, I'm ready for the next version of me? Because that's the courage, as we just constantly are. I think it was you, Jamie, that was saying, move forward. We move forward all the time. So it's not about fixing ourselves, it's just moving forward, and that we're constantly becoming bigger and more beautiful and more whole beings, like the sun. So we are getting bigger and expanding into our wholeness as we step forward into these challenges. And that's what's so beautiful as a coach, to be a witness to and a partner on the journey. So, things to help with courage. Well, first of all, I think the best thing that probably shows up the most in coaching, and maybe it's the biggest reality check for all of us, is something is difficult because we're unskilled in how to deal with it. So it's about giving yourself permission that there are ways to deal with anything that show up in our lives. And that can be really tough stuff and not so tough stuff. What are we getting anxious about? What are we getting scared of? What are we, stressing about, for example? And most of the things are because we are unskilled. And that doesn't talk, we're not talking necessarily here like, if you're abused as a child, you're unskilled in how to emotionally cope and process that. So there's no wrong in any of these invitations into evolution. It is really just a skill that we can find and add to our toolbox of life that gets us to whole being. So that's really the first thing. Then the other thing, and I think so much suffering comes to us in that we have expectations of life. We expect life to be different than it actually is. And so it can be useful to think about this concept of life is 50-50. So life is 50% negative and 50% positive. So on my little diagram, I had a circle and half black, half white, which looks similar to the yin-yang symbol, right? Where in every dark space there is light, and in every light space there is dark. But if you can think of life as 50-50, and right now, to the question that Katrina asked is, how happy am I right now? You'll see where you're sitting. Is there an overdose of the 50% on the negative side, or maybe not so much on the positive side, or vice versa? The tyranny of positivity. Just keep a smile on your face when you're actually feeling awful. Now, it's so interesting because we want to fight the 50-50 idea. It's like life should not be like that. Life should be better. Life should always be good. We actually, that's what the whole hedonic pursuit of happiness is about, is life should be better than it is. If I just fix this one thing, life will be better. But actually, if you think I'll be better, it'll be better when I've got money, and then you get there and life is still 50-50 when you've got some money. So this concept's so interesting because it's almost an acceptance of how life is showing up. But there are two things that we do, or there's actually three things that we do that make this balance between 50-50 unbalanced. And that's why so many of us are sitting and we're not happy. And so many people are looking for ways to become happy because we're doing these three things to ourselves, or, as a culture, as a people, as humanity. It's happening to all of us. And so just to be aware of these things where we almost make the negative more than the 50-50 balance. And the first one, honestly, is the negativity bias in our brains, right? We've evolved to survive. So our brain is always looking for things to help us survive. It's on hyper alert sensitivity, looking for things that are dangerous. And many of us don't need to be on such a hypersensitivity. We don't need to be on alert all the time. There's plenty of people in the world that really do, okay? Because the world is not a comfortable place. But many of us, and those of us sitting in front of a Zoom call right now, do not have a lion outside the door that is going to eat us as we step, as we get off our chairs. So be aware that your brain is always looking for the negative first. Survival mode. And that's a good thing because we do want to survive. So don't beat your brain up for being like that. It is just what it is. And to hold that as an awareness of when you go through your day, how much of the negativity bias is showing up. I mean, I'm a great example. I originally trained as a journalist, would you believe? We're trained to tell you the bad news because people love the bad news. We're attracted to it because of the negativity and the survival instinct in our brain. All right. The next thing we do to ourselves, oh my goodness, that makes the negative so much bigger, is we have our little friend, the self-critic. So everything that we're doing, we are commentating to ourselves. I've got this little like creature on my shoulder, and we're commenting. We have an internal commentary all the time, and it's usually doing compare and despair. So I'm not good enough. You should have done it like this. You shouldn't have done it like this. He's not good enough. He should make me do this. It's a constant commentary that's in your ear that is usually taking a great big stick and beating you. So the better the relationship with yourself, the better, more loving relationship with yourself that you can build, the greater your whole being can expand. All right, because quietening that voice, honoring that voice, because she also has a whole lot of interesting things to say. But you know, whenever she speaks, you often get this feeling in your body, and to breathe, like Nicole was saying, into that, to hear what she has to say, but then also not to believe her. So that's the other thing that we can do. And then the third big thing we can really watch out for is, most of us, and Katrina spoke about this in terms of emotional literacy, most of us are quite poorly skilled in how to feel our emotions. So how to actually feel better. What on earth do they mean, psychologists, when they say you must process your feelings? You know, and yet that is a skill which we're not taught at all, but that is a skill that we can learn on purpose and intentionally, how to process emotions. And that's grief, that's joy, that's boredom. So how do we stay there long enough in order for that experience to wash all the way through our bodies, through our cells and out? So that's an incredible skill that we can actually learn. And those are the ways, those three things can help you counteract this additional layer of negativity that we add onto the 50-50 balance of life. Oh, someone has an interview, shame. There's a bit of adversity for you, off to an interview. I see your time is so short. So to counteract the negative, and you've got any questions, please drop them in and Jamie and I can speak to them, because I want to give a few minutes at the end of this just to chat a bit more. So now you've got the 50-50 right now. You've got the negative side, which we've over expanded, and there's ways to counteract that. Then the other thing to do is to look at positive whole being and positive emotional whole being. And Katrina again spoke to some of this, because it is about an intention, and it is about prioritizing that we're going to upskill ourselves in this. We're actually going to strengthen ourselves in this, because it's weak most of the time. You know what, we have to the point on the brain, something good happens in our life in a moment and we don't savor it. It's gone like this, because then we're on to worrying about what's going to happen in half an hour's time. So we can really spend time cultivating positive whole being in our lives as a practice, right? So like you have a meditation practice or a breathing practice, or a feelings practice. That is a practice of cultivating positive whole being. And there are kind of quick and easy ways, like the first aid. and hacking our positive hormones. You know, we've got the 4 positive hormones. We've got the oxytocin, the serotonin, the dopamine, and the endorphins, right? So we know how to hack those, like exercise and hugging somebody and smiling and gratitude. Give us that influx, that first aid wash of hormones into our body. So that's a really useful way of growing that. The other thing to do as an intentional practice is really work with your brain. So it's about brain management. So like that is learning how to work with your brain and your thoughts, and learning how to work with your emotions intentionally and on purpose. And actually my podcast is all about how to self-coach and manage your brain. That's really what I'm passionate about. Then the other thing to do is this cultivating positive, on purpose, long-term strategies. So the paths to whole being. And so, you know, in the Lemon Rebellion, through the whole process of this week, is find a few things that really speak to you and drop into those, because there are a myriad of things we can do in order to cultivate the positive, but pick possibly just one and just really drop into it and cultivate it, even if it's breath. And I created the happiness challenge for us this week, is to give you a little idea of something each day that you could try. So breath was today's challenge. You'll have to see what tomorrow's is, but it's related to each of the themes. And it is just that opportunity in the moment, in the day, to see if this is a practice that I would like to cultivate intentionally going forward as the work to strengthen the other 50% of life. So the 50% positive. So it's a very intentional, purposeful habit practice that we want to do. So that's really, like in a nutshell, what I wanted to talk about. So to leave some time, if people could have questions, or if anybody wants to raise their hands, then we can have a 8-minute coaching session.
Sure. You have a couple good comments here you might want to take a look at from Raquel and Karen, if you see them.
Oh, yes, I can. Okay, so from Raquel, perfect, thank you. So resonated with struggling to fully feel emotions, how to surrender to them. I'm willing, but still blocked from them, even love. That's really interesting. So as a quick example, the word is a concept, all right? So it's a head concept. So the word love. So the best way to tap in is to close your eyes and repeat the word love to yourself several times until the word stops being a concept and drops into your body. Because what you want to do is develop your own language, your physical language for what love actually is. So it's a sensational experience, actually. But we've almost like hybridized everybody's sensations in the world and given it a name and called it love. But everyone's experience is slightly different, just like happiness. Everyone's experience is slightly different. So if you can drop love into your body, or pain, or sadness, and then start to describe it in your physical body. So what is my breath doing when I say love? What is going on in my stomach with love? What color is in my stomach in love? What sound lives in my leg with love? And you develop a language for love that is out of your head and into your whole being. And it's a great practice, Raquel, to practice that on purpose, like on a daily basis. You could practice one negative emotion and one positive emotion, so that you expand your emotional repertoire. I hope that's helpful. And Karen, light to white light to rainbow paths. No urgency. If the opportunity goes away, something else becomes available. Absolutely. You know, in my little diagram are sunflowers in the one corner, because I think this is the fascinating thing. The sunflower, which follows the sun and is the symbol of happiness for many people, is, you know, it is just one, but in that sunflower face, there's thousands of seeds. And all you need is one seed to be planted when it falls on the ground. And that, you know, like as a gardener, you know, the seeds, you got to nurture them and you love them, but that seed's time might be in 12 years time, and this seed's time is today. So never panic for what to choose or what to pick. Is kind of go for the thing that, if you can be brave enough, the thing that feels the hardest, that's the thing to look at. And the way to, and the what to do when you look at it is the thing that makes your heart sing the most. If that's helpful.
Thank you, Julia. That's awesome. I wanted to ask a question, and everyone, please feel free to keep sending comments or, unmute yourself. We're a small, intimate group here. That's the whole idea of Lemon Rebellion, is you can come on and talk to Julia as well. I'm I'm thinking about this term I heard. So there's rumination, which is when we ruminate and go through, the hard time, the bad story, the rough experience. But we can also use that as a tool for positivity, positive rumination, and looking at what happened and focusing on the good that comes out of it. So again, your analogy of the black and white to the rainbow. Um, what are your thoughts on, as part of a whole being practice, using rumination and trying to get over that negativity bias and trying to create a positivity tendency, if not bias, by teaching ourselves to focus more and more and more on those rainbow colors, the things that are going right, that kind of thing.
Me or you? I hope that's. Oh, I think I just pressed my watch to ping. Sorry. So, so ruminating's fascinating, all right? Because we actually have a part in our brain that's called the ruminating. It's got a very posh Latin name, but it's the ruminating brain, all right? And so in meditation, we get out of the ruminating brain, okay? And even in the prefrontal cortex here, which is our, what they call the executive control, our thinking, our sort of problem solving brain, that also gets us out of the ruminating brain, which is over here somewhere. So that is quite fascinating, but I love the opposite side of the ruminating brain, as I call it, the noodling brain. So brain noodling, and that's my most favorite things. In fact, that's what I was doing all morning this morning, was just sitting, having a cup of coffee and letting my brain noodle. So I have a pen, I write things down, I look at the clouds, I, might send a message on my phone, but I just am noodling. And that is positive ruminating, right? I'm thinking about the clouds, I'm checking in with my body, I'm thinking about you guys this afternoon. And it's just like, think about, my husband was so difficult last night, but I do love him. And, those kind of things. So it's just that slight shift. It's such a nice thing, this word pivot, that we all got sick of during COVID. Think of it as that, all right? You can pivot without positivity whitewashing, all right? Without the tyranny of positivity. All you need to do is notice where you are right now, and can I pivot slightly? That's all. And then you are fully on the path to shifting your brain from ruminating to noodling, or shifting your body, whatever, into that whole being rainbow of happiness. The unicorn. See, we're going to find the unicorn at the end of this summit. Did you know that? Yeah.
Thank you, Julia.
Right.
That's awesome. If we find a unicorn at the end of the summit, I will be the happiest girl in the world. But I know that we're all going to find an insight, which is basically like a personal unicorn from this experience. Because with all of these incredible things that we're sharing, that's the only possible outcome. I think I just want to point out how beautiful this is that you're sharing that the whole being happiness is about coming kind of back into your body and feeling things, finding your kind of inner happiness as a feeling as opposed to just a concept. I think that's really, really interesting.
And it was so lovely to do Nicole's breath work because, you know, that's kind of got that very, it's very physical in the body, but it's also very spiritual
Mm.
in the whole list of beings, you know. And that's really what all of this is that real primordial wisdom and sacred happiness that we are connecting to show up really as our full selves, because that's what we're here for, eh? Is to be out there in the world as our whole hugest, wholest selves, like the sun, you know.
Like the sun, the light. I love it. Thank you, Julia. Any last words to share before we move on to our next presenter?
I thank you. That was a very powerful analogy in such a short amount of time. And I loved going from the brain to the heart and feeling it in your body in colors and in thoughts or how it affects your body. So I agree with you too. That was, Jamie, that was very powerful. Thank you.
You.
Thank you,
It
Karen,
was
for
really
sharing.
fun to be here. Yeah.
Well, and like Julia said, every day of the week, this week, we have the happiness challenge that she's designed for us to apply one new happiness habit. So you'll get that in your email with the Zoom link for the content each day so that you can go through that video, get inspired. I'm also going to leave a link here to Julia's website in the chat so you can hop on there and learn more about her and what she does. And Julia, thank you as always. Seeing you fills my heart with joy, and I love it. Thank you for hanging out.
Well, thank you for showing up because Jamie spent yesterday inside an agave plant. She fell off her bike.
I did. I fell off my bike and I fell into a giant blue agave plant, and my back is all scratched up. My arm is a little bit scratched up. But we decided with Julia that is a perfect example of what it means to be the lemon rebellion. Crap happens. Just pick yourself up. Yeah, you don't need to positive wash it, but cry. It hurt. I was pissed. But then when I was ready, I got back up on my bike, finished 2 more kilometers until my tire popped. Then I got in a taxi and came back, but I never gave up.
And then she got onto a live with me, just so you guys all know. Very impressive.
Yes, very good. Awesome. Thanks, Julia. Well,
Okay.
next up, we're going to hear from Gloria.